just want to make sure she can record. Much luck, because my computer will die. The monthly seminar series. Today is September 10th, and we're presenting on cytometry. Next month, we will be presenting our human biophysiology shared resource, and then I will update you when we determine what's going to happen for our November, December seminars as well. Our calendar submissions for our shared resources wall calendar are now open. You can visit the Wilmot Shared Resources webpage on the News and Events tab to submit images. This primarily revolves around our imaging and radiation shared resource, but we are pretty open. But these are some of the images that were selected for our 2024 shared resource calendar. And if your image is selected, you do win a $50 prize. So if that incentivizes you, please submit. And we will have these calendars ready for distribution at the Wilmot Symposium in November. All right.
Wojtek, we got to work on those image stream pictures.
All right, and with that, I'm going to leave it to Tim's and Matt to present on the cytometry shared resource.
Oh, sorry, you had an announcement in there. I'm sorry.
That's okay. I didn't realize I had it animated.
Okay.
But that you can visit the Wilmot Shared Resources News and Events to submit images.
Excellent. Thank you, Tracy. I'm glad we're here. I appreciate everybody coming to learn a little bit more about what we're doing in the cytometry shared resource for the Wilmot. This will be a tag team effort between myself and Matt Cochran. But just to introduce you first to the team, Tim Mossman and I serve as the co-directors for the facility for Wilmot. I deal more with the operational side of things, and Tim is more on the high-end data analysis. So if you're doing a high-dimensional data analysis and have questions, he's got some tools and some extensive experience in that area. So I encourage you to talk to him. Right there. The day-to-day operational team is Matt Cochran and Dr. Wojtek Wojciechowski. Matt is our technical director and deals with all the fun stuff, like when the machines break and training and all in how to help design panels. And Wojtek is here to help develop assays. So if you have a problem or you have a question and you want to develop an assay for it, he can help you point you to the right instrumentation, help develop that assay, help you validate that, and provide your data analysis support. And of course, the facility wouldn't work without the core staff that we have. We've got 6, we used to have 7. Unfortunately, Daria has left us and has gone to graduate school, good for her. Hopefully we'll get her back after that. We'll see, but this is a team that is there to help you. If you have questions, you can reach out to any one of them. If you use the Slack channel, one of them will come talk to you and help you with getting your problem solved. What I wanted to emphasize is the equipment that we have. So I've kind of broken this into 3 different areas. Our analytical tools, shown here. The top ones here are fluorescent based. We also have, wrong button. We have the mass cytometer, and we have 2 different imaging cytometers. I've given you the names because we, for many, many years ago, decided to use the Muppets because we keep getting more instruments. So if you refer to one of these, we'll understand. It's kind of fun to have a senior faculty member write to us and say, Zoot is not working, can you help me? Or, Sweetums is broken, or so don't hesitate to use those. Our middle column are our cell sorters. So in addition to be able to analyze your samples, we can actually isolate those. The Cytec CS and the Symphony are newer instruments. They can do 6-way sorting. The Aurora CS is great because it links directly with our full spectrum analyzer. So if you design an analytical panel, you can easily transfer it over to the sorter without having to do a lot of work. The S6 Symphony is 24 colors now, also a 6-way sorter. It is basically a replacement for the Faxarias, which sadly must leave us in the end of the year. The BD is no longer providing service contracts, and it will be prohibitively expensive for us to keep these running. So we've retired these and replaced those with these 2 instruments. And of course, additionally, we have a Bioplex 200. We have a small particle analyzer, the Nanocyte NS300, And we have a metabolomics instrument, the Seahorse XFE6096. And if you're interested in doing analysis with that system, we can do full service for you. You just drop us the cells and we'll take care of everything else. And if you want to talk to Wojtek, he can help you with that. The other thing I wanted to mention, because this is very important, is acknowledgements in paper are our currency. You currently get a 40% discount, I believe, on services for the flow cytometry facility. And for us to keep that up, I need to be able to demonstrate to Wilmot leadership that they're getting bang for their buck. And from 2019 to 2023, the CSR data was used in 117 cancer-related publications. Unfortunately, only 27 papers, or 23%, acknowledged us that they used our facilities. That's criminal. And if you want that discount to maintain and you want the Cancer Center to help support acquisition of the next generation of instruments, please remember to acknowledge us. If you use data, put it in there and just a simple acknowledgement at the end. For example, here's an acknowledgement from a paper that Scott Gerber published. You can see at the bottom, he acknowledged the Genomics Center and the flow cytometry facility for for helping with their data. Simple, simple, simple. Please, please help us with that. And now I'm going to turn it over to Matt, and we're going to talk about a little bit more behind the flow cell and give you a chance to meet the Muppets. You don't have the music playing.
No, I took the video out. There was a video at one point, but I decided to be a bit more professional with my Muppet pictures today. All right, thank you, Tim. Yeah, so Matt Cochran, I am the technical director of the flow cytometry resource. So I'm there for the day-to-day stuff, and I'm happy to consult with anybody that wants to come in. Obviously, Wojtek and Tim with helping with the leadership as well. We appreciate that. Email address is up there. I'm usually people's first point of contact, so feel free to email me with any questions you've got. I may pass that along. That's just to whoever's going to work with you directly, but you're always welcome to email me and stuff like that. As it sort of alludes to in the title, I want to give a bit of detail on the equipment that we have in the lab and how you would compare the how you would compare the different pieces of equipment, make your choices, and what the strengths and weaknesses are of some of these different types. I think it's easy to get kind of locked in on what you're doing and what has worked in the past, and if maybe we can see where some of the strengths and weaknesses are, we can make more informed choices on how to proceed. And maybe you've never heard of some of this stuff because you're either new to this entirely, which I think a few people in the room probably are, or you just you haven't been asked to do something in particular. Advance. Yes. So first things first, what can't we measure with flow cytometry? So flow cytometry, the power here we're talking is speed, first of all, thousands, millions of cells in a short period of time, and also the depth of the information you can receive back now. It started as speed. It's now progressed more into the depth of the information that you can get as well. I'm talking newer instrumentation doing 40, 50, 60 parameters at a time on your cells as you measure them, right? So we could do a lot. We can measure a lot. We can measure a lot quickly. But the catalog of things we can measure nowadays is also just ginormous. It's huge. It's a mature technology, 60-something years the technology's been around, especially in the last 25, 28 years or something like that. It's really exploded. The new fluorochromes coming out, the new kits and the new directly interrogating markers that these new companies have come out with are just impressive. I'm not going to read the list or anything like that, but the point of the slide is to say, if you want the power of flow, which is the numbers and which is the depth of the information you can get back, but you're not entirely sure how to go about using it to get what you want, there's going to be a way, right? If you're measuring cells, if you're measuring functions within the cells, we'll find a way to do that. I don't know them all off the top of my head, and I'm guessing Tim knows probably more than me, but not all of them off the top of his head, but we can figure these things out. There are ways to do all this. So if you have any inkling of using the power of flow, let's figure it all out. All right, so with that being said, let's talk about machines. And I start with one of my favorite toys in the lab, and that is the ImageStream Mark II. We call the ImageStream Big Bird, which is fantastic. Love that. It is an imaging flow cytometer. So it's a true hybrid imaging flow cytometer. The cells are flowing through, hence the term flow, but they are being imaged as they flow through in up to 9 or 10 fluorescent parameters. The machine has 4 lasers and can measure up to 9 to 10 simultaneous fluorescent parameters. With submicron resolution, you get all of this combined into one machine. It really is, as far as I'm concerned, it really is the best of both worlds. You get 500, 800, 1,000 cells per second you're measuring in each of these parameters, and then you actually get that detail of where that fluorescence is coming from, right? Traditional flow cytometry technologies are great. They have all the speed, they have all that stuff, but you don't see the cell, right? This machine, you see the cell, you see where that fluorescence is coming from. Is that cell, has the nucleus started to, as the example at the bottom there, has the nucleus started to kind of bunch up, and you can tell that cell's going into apoptosis. Cell-to-cell interactions, you can see the synapse between the two cells. You can see this, the subcellular matrix, even if you label it properly, such you can see what's going on there. It's just a really, really cool tool. Sadly, it's a little slower than some of the other technologies that we have, right? If you're used to running 5,000 events per second, you're talking about 700, 800 events per second, more likely. But I mean, it's still a lot, right? And we are getting all of that information in a short period of time. If anything, the trouble with this machine comes with the fact that you just walk away with 30 gigs worth of data, and you're like, where do I start? How do I get what I want to out of this? Dealing with that information can be kind of tricky, but it's just a massive amount. And if you have any idea or any need for the imaging, it can be really useful. And even if you don't think you have a need for the imaging, you just want to do some quick conformational analysis, that can also be really useful. I think this labeling is what I expect, but if I put it on here, I can see that it's what I expect. I don't have to do it forever, right? But I can confirm that stuff by looking at these images and knowing that that fluorescence is coming from where I expected. Super cool tool. We also have an adherent cell, plate-based imaging system called the Celigo S. This is a 3 fluorescent parameter instrument. It's obviously not a flow cytometer, the cells aren't flowing through, but it's pretty high throughput. It's got a very wide field of view, so you can measure a 96-well plate in a very short period of time, a few minutes. It's super easy to use. There are a number of optimized assays on the web, not on the website, that the companies produce. Outside of those optimized assays, it can be a little bit hard to manufacture your own project for it, but if it fits well with what the assays are that are presented, then it's a great tool. It's super easy to use. The resolution's not great. But for quick analysis, it's often quite good. And things like fluorescent reporters on your adherent cells, if you don't want to scrape them off the plate and stuff like that, cytotoxicity assays. We do a lot of cell counting, direct cell counting in there, right? Because you can image, again, the whole plate very rapidly if you want to. So this is another simple but powerful tool that a lot of people get. You're not on there for very long. You do a quick image or two, and then you move on to the next thing, and it can get a lot of information really quickly. Also flow adjacent is our Bioplex 200. Tim mentioned this one earlier as well. This is commonly called a Luminex. Everybody calls it a Luminex. They're exactly the same machine with a different sticker on the front. But not everybody knows, this is an interesting machine because it actually is it's just a flow cytometer. It's a 2-laser flow cytometer, but it's specifically made to measure these beads. So it's chemokines and cytokines in solution. The beads are labeled with the target. The cytokines will adhere to that target, and then you can measure that as it comes out. It's super easy to use. Again, very straightforward working through the software. There's a huge catalog of targets and analytes that you can measure. There are many that you can measure, and you can measure as many as 100 at a time in your samples, which is also very cool because these precious samples, you got 50 microliters of serum, and you can measure a huge amount with a small volume. this is a common technology. Most people have heard of this if they haven't used it themselves. But we have one in the lab, and you can get trained and you can use it on your own anytime you'd like to. It is a little bit expensive. It feels expensive anyway when you see a few $1,000s for your kit, but then when you figure the fact that you're measuring 30 analytes at a time, it's not. It ends up working out, but it feels expensive. And sometimes mixing the kits and getting the dilution factors correct can be a little bit tricky. It takes a little bit of effort, but once you're past all that, it's super straightforward and easy to use. I will mention most everything in the lab we do offer direct hands-on training for, so you don't have to, but you will be able to operate these things on your own. This is everything I've mentioned so far is a perfect example of that. Relatively straightforward training programs, and then you can use them as you see fit. There are a few that you can't, and I will allude to that as well as we go along. But generally speaking, you guys can use this as much as you want and whenever you want. The NS300 is our small particle analysis instrument. This is really focusing in on about a half a micron and down, and depending on what the material is that you're measuring, you can go down as low as 15 to 20 nanometers in size. It is strictly sizing and counting. Doesn't really do fluorescence great, which is a drawback in terms of the flow cytometry lab, because we do a lot with fluorescence, right? But it really does measure those particles quite quickly and accurately for sizing and counting information. If you don't know, it works on it's called nanocyte tracking. It measures you get scatter off of the particles in solution, and then measure the Brownian motion of those particles in that solution to measure the size of them. It's a neat idea, and that's the technology that this works behind. Really broad size and concentration ranges. So if you want to measure, extracellular vesicles, engineered nanoparticles, bacteria and stuff like that, there's a lot of people that are using this machine. The XFE96, the Seahorse instrument, has a small but dedicated group of users. This is measuring changes in oxygen and pH in your cultures. Again, obviously not a flow cytometer. There's no cellular measurements going on here. We're measuring the products of those cells in culture. Again, easy to use, super high sensitivity. It's really dependent on the cell counts in your wells, in your culture wells. But when you pair that with the Saligo and its counting ability, you can do both things back to back very rapidly and get all this information. As Tim alluded to, this is a perfect candidate for those full service experiments that we can support you guys with. Because the kits are pretty straightforward to use, and we can run them for you, assuming you've got the cells that you need to be measured. All right, transitioning into our cell sorting. So that was all the flow adjacent technologies. Transitioning into our cell sorting technologies. Again, as Tim alluded to, Statler and Waldorf, our two FACS ARIA instruments, are being retired. You can see them already getting pretty laid back and enjoying their retirement here. They're still in the lab and they're still in use for now, but 4 lasers and 18 fluorescent parameters, somewhat matched to the FACS Diva, the BD FACS Diva instruments that we've got in the lab. Historically speaking, they've been extremely flexible in terms of their setup and in terms of how they collect the cells. Just workhorse instruments for us. We've had them for years and years now. I think we go back, when you had your first one in 2002 or something, like 2001? Yeah. But anyway, the machines have changed a little bit, but we've had them for all this time. We are, again, moving on from that, changing it up a little bit. That transition is in progress right now. For anybody that works with us, you will note these machines are currently blocked on the calendar. If you need them for a specific reason, we will get you on them. But the newer machines are open on the calendar. These guys are currently blocked, and we'll just fit people in as we need to. So that transition is underway right now. Speaking of the new instruments, we have Agnes, our BDS6 cell sorter. Tim mentioned this as a direct replacement for the FACS Diva-based instruments, for the FACS ARIAs. When I say FACS Diva, by the way, if you don't know, that's the software that runs underneath everything. And the old machines were called the FACS ARIA. This is called the S6. They got less creative with their names, but it stands for sorter number 6. But this machine is 5 lasers and can do up to 6-way cell sorting. So if you needed that, if you wanted to collect 6 populations simultaneously, this machine can do that for you. right? So you're running your cells through, you're analyzing your cells as they move through the system. You're identifying populations of interest that you would like to collect back, and those cells are then sorted into collection tubes or onto a plate or onto a slide that you can then take away with you for your downstream genomics work, your downstream proteomics work, or your culturing or whatever it is that you need to do with them. Again, bread and butter technologies that we have to have in the lab. This machine being a direct replacement for the FACS ARIAs is an easy sell to the user base. They know exactly what to expect. It looks the same when they look at the software. The machine itself doesn't, but the software looks almost identical. So institutional knowledge, institutional experience is extensive, basically, because it's a direct transition there. The downsides of this machine is really only that it's complicated, right? We, as operators of this machine who have been doing this for years, can really get into there and mess with things and make it work the way that we want it to work. But that's not something that a general user would be able to step up to and just do all of that stuff. The cell sorters are machines that we will operate for you. You'll come up with your samples and we will operate the instrument with your guidance on what populations you want and how you'd like us to set the gates and things, but we'll be the ones hands-on dealing with the machine there. Again, great technology. It is, the changes here are that this is a 5-laser machine and has 6-way instead of 4-way sorting, but it's a straight replacement, so that's great. Next, we've got our Aurora CS, or Link Hogthrob, if you're a fan of the Pigs in Space series from the Muppets. This is again 5 lasers and again 6-way sorting, so that part is matched. This machine will do up to 40 fluorescent parameters simultaneously. Rarely do we need that many, but if you needed that many, you could do that many. Tim, have you gotten to 40 yet on the 5-laser machine? No?
About 32.
Okay, yeah. So it's not gonna be easy, but you could potentially get to 40. This machine, the strength here is that you get the full spectrum benefits and flexibility without any downsides, really. So the compliment that I give to this machine, and I've actually had this conversation with Cytech, the compliment that I give to people about this machine is that I don't even think about the cell sorting side. It does what it's supposed to do. That's what it's there for, right? What I think about with this machine is how I can leverage all the benefits of the full spectrum technology to really improve the operations that I'm going through. I think it's a huge sell for this machine. I don't even worry about the fact that it's gonna sort. It's gonna sort, that's what it's there for, right? But then I can get all those benefits, which again, I'm gonna come back to. But I get all those benefits without any real downside from it. The weaknesses are the limited institutional experience, right? It's a hard sell sometimes if people have not sat down in front of this or not had one of their colleagues use this machine before. We've now had it for a year and 2 months, something like that. And there's not that many groups that are dedicated to it. But that's not because groups are trying it and not liking it. It's because groups don't really want to try it if they don't have to, right? But I'm telling you now, and I tell people when I talk to them, it does what it's supposed to do, and you get all those extra benefits, which we're going to come to here. The only other thing that I don't love is, and it hasn't been a huge issue for us, but everything's software controlled, which scares me a little bit, right? If I'm relying on the computer to make there's a bunch of cameras inside of it and stuff like that, which scares me, right? I don't want all those little computer things, fiddly things to go wrong, but we don't really have those problems. It just scares me, right? So example assays, I said this was on the last slide as well. Anything and everything, right? Cell sorting needs, these machines will do it for you. We do not currently have any like dedicated machines for this type of project or for this type of project. They'll just do it all, right? So you can pick whichever one you want. You really can, and with these 2 examples, pick just about anything you'd want to do. All right, let's transition into our analytical instruments for a little while. So traditional analytical instruments, the BD Acuri C6 Plus, that is the full name now, is a cool little workhorse. It's 2 lasers, it's 4 fluorescent parameters. It's super easy to use. But the reason it's so easy to use is because it's just not very flexible at all. It just does what it does, right? So you put your samples on, you hit go, and then you hit stop, and your data comes out. There's no adjustments. You just get data back. If that lines up with your needs, it's amazing, right? You're good to go in no time at all. The training on this machine is about 30 to 45 minutes, and most of that is me talking about flow course stuff and not the machine itself, because the machine's so straightforward to use. This machine is actually located over in the MRB building. Again, it's really robust. The new machine is really robust. The old machine, if you guys had experience with the C6 instruments way back in the day, they were not very robust. The new one is really robust, and it just runs, right? You just put your samples on, you get your data back, and you walk away. It's super easy. So yeah, you're doing simple GFP on-off, or you want to do actually direct cell counting. This machine is volumetric, so you can actually do direct cell counting on this machine. That's one of my favorite features of the new volumetric instruments, including the C6 Plus. It's awesome to do cell counting. You don't have to do any labeling or anything like that, but if you do direct cell counting on there, you get those scatter profiles, and you can actually kind of do some subsetting directly in there, and you can tell debris from cells and stuff like that. Really useful. And then you save that FCS file. If you ever need to go back to it, you can go back to it anytime you want to, right? So it's a nice use. You can run through a ton of samples in a short period of time on this machine. Then we have our FACSDIVA-based instruments. I mentioned FACSDIVA before with regards to BD and the S6 cell sorter. We have 4 FACSDIVA-based instruments. They are 2 categories, the LSR Fortessa and the Symphony A1 instrument. By the way, A1 is Analyzer 1, right? Super fun. They used to have fun names. They've kind of moved away from it a little bit. So Dr. Teeth, Camilla, Janice, and Zoot, and that is Fortessa on the left and Symphony A1 on the right. They look very different. I actually meant to put a Symphony A1 picture up here. They look very different. They operate exactly the same way. The new A1 instrument's quite a bit smaller when you look at it, but it literally operates exactly the same way. The buttons are the same. The sample introduction is exactly the same. Super easy to go back and forth. The Fortessas are 5 lasers. The A1s are 4 lasers. So that's 18 parameters or 16 parameters, fluorescent parameters, excuse me. Strengths here, there's 4 of them. So availability and redundancy, that's nice to have that flexibility. Anything you can do on Janice or Zoot, you can pretty much do on Dr. Teeth and Camilla. So you can kind of go, you can't exactly go back and forth because they're not exactly the same, but it's nice to have that flexibility and stuff. Institutional experience, again, with BD instrumentation, we go back 25 years now, 24 years now, whatever it is. So there's a ton of institutional experience with these instruments, both in my team, and Tim and I, and also in the user base at large. So that is a huge strength, I think, for these machines. Another strength for these machines is operational flexibility. What I mean by operational flexibility is the way you interact with the front end of the machine, loading the samples and stuff like that. It's really flexible. You want to do a real quick check and just toggle between samples, you can do that pretty quickly. And you want to start a run, pause the run, spike the sample, put the tube back on. You can do all this stuff really simply, right? So interacting with the front end is really kind of nice. Weaknesses, which they've always been there, but they are becoming more for me at least, they're coming more to the fore, are issues with longitudinal stability and issues with the configurations and how unique they are. I'm going to come back to that with regards to the Auroras in a minute and the full spectrum technology, but it's really starting to create a gap. So these machines are great for one-off assays are fantastic. These are great if you just want to jump in really quickly, or if you're carrying on a consistent project or something like that, and you just want to continue with the same instrumentation. These machines are good. The full spectrum, I didn't realize there was an animation here. The full spectrum analytical instruments, the Cytec Aurora instruments, there are 2 of them, Constantine and Sweetums. They are 5 lasers and 40 parameters. And when I say they are 5, there's actually a 4 and a 5 right now. But if you were here earlier, we were talking about the upgrade on this machine. The Constantine is currently a 4 laser instrument. It is being upgraded to a 5 laser instrument, I believe, in the next 2 weeks. So these 2 machines will be matched. And they will be matched with the cell sorter as well. They will both be matched with the cell sorter as well. Okay, strengths and weaknesses. I'm going to spend some time on this. I don't spend time on this necessarily to convince you to use this machine, although I think they're great. It's more because we know the Factiva instruments really well. The institutional knowledge is there, whereas it's not as much with these guys. So I wanted to emphasize some things that separate these two technologies. So strengths, sensitivity. There's a bit of a strength and weakness built into this. The sensitivity is fantastic on these instruments. Where that becomes a problem, and sensitivity is a weird, fuzzy term, I get that, but I'll hopefully figure that out here. Where that becomes a little bit of an issue for some people is the way that the technology works, the way that the full spectrum technology works is you're measuring these fluorochromes across the entire spectrum that is excited and captured by the machine. So rather than the traditional instruments, which is this fluorochrome goes in this detector, I'm measuring that detector, and that's what I care about, this machine measures all of it. And if there's anything that's a little bit different along the way, it thinks it's a different fluorochrome. So precision in controls and precision in how you set these things up is really critical. There's a lot of fuzz, if you will, on the traditional instruments. There's big gaps in the spectrum that we're not measuring. And if something happens there, we don't worry about it so much. You argue that's a bad thing, but that's the way that they work. So a lot of times if you just want to do a quick one-off experiment, you can get away with more on the Factiva instruments because you can just give it a shot. That may not be the best answer you could get, but you could get something quicker. Whereas these guys, you oftentimes have to be more precise with your sample prep. You have to be more precise with your control of your reagents and things. And that, again, while I think that's good practice in general, that is difficult to do sometimes. Unique fluorochrome combinations. This is the strength that most people think about when they think about this technology. Because of that full spectrum technology, we can do more fluorochromes, first of all, and you can do different combination of fluorochromes that you couldn't get away with before. I think that's a bit baked in to the knowledge about these instruments now. So I don't spend a ton of time talking about that. It's true, you can, but I don't spend as much time talking about that. The two things that I like to spend more time talking about with regards to these machines are the standardization / longitudinal stability and the configuration compatibility. Those two things might not make a ton of sense to you right now, but longitudinal stability. The machines have a built-in normalization, basically, that they do. If anybody here has been doing flow for a long time, 10 years ago or so, BD started promoting, and we went along with them for a while, started promoting something called application-specific settings. Does anybody remember application-specific settings? Nobody? I feel like some of you have heard of it before. But anyway, the idea here was you would run your settings on day one and you would save those settings. And then it would track the settings and modify things for you to normalize it for you over time. The idea is fantastic, right? And then you don't have to worry about it. It's all gonna match up from day to day. Well, in practice, it never really worked. It never really worked. Was it better than nothing? Maybe, but it certainly wasn't what it promised to be. So when the Auroras came out and they announced this ability that they have, this longitudinal ability and normalization, I kind of just threw it away. I was like, yeah, sure, whatever, right? We'll run them like we need to run them. But it turns out it actually works really well. It works very well, better than I could have hoped, actually, I think. What that turns into is assuming good control of the assay conditions in your lab. If you come in and run your samples on day one and you run your controls on day one and you like the output that you got, you don't have to run those again. Those controls will carry forward over time such that you can continue to apply them and everything will normalize over time. Now, the controls in your lab still have to be there, right? You still have to make sure you're handling your antibodies well and all that stuff. But if you're doing all that properly, you can run for weeks, if not months, with the same controls and not have to rerun that stuff. When you do have to rerun something, say I bought a new lot of PE-Cy7 antibody or something like that. Well, the new lot's going to have a slightly different fluorescence characteristics, right? So I would have to rerun that. But I only have to rerun that control. I don't have to rerun all the controls. I rerun that one, and again, everything normalizes, and I can continue on. There's so many ways we can leverage this information, this ability on the machines, such that for my money, if you're running repeated experiments, if you're running the same panel over and over again over time, there's nothing better in the lab, right? The Diva instruments have their strengths. That's not one of them. So I think that's fantastic. And again, we can talk about how you can leverage that for your specific project, but it really does work. The other thing that I think is really neat is this configuration compatibility. Again, weird term. What I mean by that is when I say these machines, these 5 laser machines are matched, they're matched. So what that means is we can run our experiment on Constantine, once it's 5 lasers, we can run our experiment on Constantine, and if we liked what we got, we could take that experiment out and plug it into Sweetums and run it there as well. We don't have to rebuild everything, we can just run it. Oftentimes, not always, but oftentimes you can actually take the files themselves and import them and just reuse them. You don't have to rerun the controls at all. Not just the experiment outline, you can just not even have to run the controls at all. You want to test that, but it can work. So that also means we can build things in the cloud. So we build experiments in the cloud. You don't have to label all your tubes while you're sitting in front of the machine. You can label them on your couch and then come in the next day and run the samples. You can label them on our analytical machine, our analysis machine that is a separate instrument. There's so much flexibility because of that configuration compatibility that they've got. That will never be the case with the Diva instruments because they're all unique entities. Even if everything's labeled exactly the same way and we make the configuration say exactly the same thing, they will not talk to each other. You always have to recreate it, which is not the end of the world. You can still optimize across machines, but it's just more work that you have to do. And these guys, we can just plop back and forth. So that goes, again, with the 2 analytical machines that I'm talking about here, but also with the cell sorter as well, right? So if you want to try something out, try it on the analyzer for yourself, run it a couple of times, set up all your gating, set everything up on the analyzer, take it all out, plug it into the sorter, sit down and start running samples, right? It's a really big benefit that these machines give to us. Now, again, if you're not running the same panel over and over again, maybe that you don't need those benefits and you just use the other machines, that's fine. But if you do want to take advantage of these things, it's really great. Another thing that I want to dive more into and I want to talk to people more about is autofluorescence as a parameter. You can actually use the autofluorescence of your cells and get the information back from that. This has always kind of been a thing in flow, but mostly autofluorescence is something that we try and work around rather than take advantage of in flow cytometry. These machines, you can actually really build that into your analyses and take advantage of that information. Again, I'm not going into a ton of detail right now, but that is an interesting feature. And both of our machines have plate loaders, which is nice. The plate loaders are decent. If anybody remembers the old HTS systems on the BD-LSR2s, I never really liked them. I did a lot of work with them, but I never really liked them. There was a lot of finicky bits and stuff like that. These guys are better. I still don't love them because I like the control in my own hands. But they are much better on these machines. And these machines are volumetric as well. Again, that you can do your direct cell count, you can get that volume information from your samples when you run it. So the weaknesses are the same, less institutional experience. The analytical machines are actually super busy nowadays. People have bought into that, I think. But the cell sorter is still lagging a little bit. Ratiometric assays, there are people working on this, there are people who do this, but there's a little bit of weirdness with changing fluorescence spectrums for things like calcium flux and things like that. So that's often just easier to do on the other machines because it's kind of tried and true. And then that software control and reliance that I mentioned with the sorter is the same here. Again, doesn't cause us too many issues, but there's more often the case that you have to like control alt delete the software and reopen it to reconnect something or something like that. It's not a huge deal. All right, last instrument to talk about right now is our mass cytometer, the Helios. Cytoph is the catch-all term here. That's what they used to call them. But the new machine's called the Helios. This is Ludo. I don't know why Ludo's, oh, there's the name. Strengths here. This machine uses metal tags instead of fluorescent tags. So there's no issues with autofluorescence or anything like that. The mass, it uses mass spec as its output. You still end up with an FCS file, a standard flow cytometry data file, but it's generated in a very different way. The power of mass spec is the precision that you're getting out of these machines, right? So this machine can measure 40, 50, 60 parameters at a time without having to deal with fluorescence spillover and all of those things that we deal with traditional flow cytometry. What spillover there is in the system is kind of baked in and known. It's not a fluctuating thing like with fluorescence. So it's much easier to deal with panel design. There's a relative ease there because again, all of that information is kind of baked in. Barcoding works fantastic on this machine for people who want to combine samples and run them as one large sample rather than as multiple individual samples. Really, it's a machine for discovery and really depth of measurements that you're going to make because of how many targets you can measure simultaneously. It is quite a bit slower. Again, we're talking topping out at 500 or 600 events per second on this machine, which can really stretch out your runs if you're trying to collect large sample numbers or cell numbers. There's sample prep concerns. There's no autofluorescence, but there's also no scatter information as well, which is a very useful parameter that we have in our traditional instruments. Without that, you really have to be careful about your sample prep so you're not measuring junk instead of real cells. There are ways to work around it, but it's something to be concerned with, or not concerned with, something to be cognizant of. There's no redundancy at all, right? We have one of them. And there's all new reagents you need to buy. You cannot use your fluorescent antibodies here. You need these metal tagged antibodies. In the end, the cost works out to be similar oftentimes to the fluorescence, but you still have to start from zero instead of using the ones that are in your tackle box in your fridge or in your neighbor's tackle box in their fridge. So you're buying everything from new. Is this machine right for everybody? Oh.
Yeah. So when you say cost, do you mean the cost per sample is similar? Or
the cost for the reagents themselves is similar.
No, the cost. I was thinking the cost per sample. If you want.
That's a more complicated calculus.
Right, because the cost per cell, I think, is way higher than the fluorescence machines. But if your sample can be smaller,
yes,
then you could align them more.
Yes. So I think generally speaking, the cost for a project will be higher with this machine because the cost per cell is higher. The ways you can work past that are because of the reduction in the number of controls you need to run and those kinds of things. So for the right project, it can work out, but generally speaking, absolutely, I think it would be more expensive for you. Yeah, so this, again, that's where I was heading with this. This is not a machine for every project, but it's a machine for some projects and it can work really well for those projects. One of the things that I like, I mentioned no redundancy here as a weakness, but I mentioned sample storage as a strength. What I'm getting to there is there's no fluorescence involved with these, right? If your cells are well fixed, right, you label your cells and then you fix them properly, you can store them more or less indefinitely if you want to and run them whenever you need to run them. We've had samples sit in fixative for 2 weeks. Some of that time in the fridge, some of that time sitting on the tarmac because they weren't shipped properly. Ran them 2 weeks later and they were perfect. We've had samples that we have labeled, frozen, thawed 6 months later and put on the machine and they were perfect. So much more flexibility that. So while there's no redundancy, if it's not working on the day you're ready, you can pause and just come back to it when it is working. So it's nice in that respect. And it's also nice when you're talking about a project for how you can coordinate pieces to fit together. Whereas with real-time running for fluorescence, that can be a lot more difficult. So that can be a boon for some projects as well. All right. I don't want to go into detail here, but this is the comparing the three technologies, right? The traditional technology, I mentioned how one fluorochrome per detector basically is what they're looking at. Whereas with the full spectrum, you're measuring the full spectrum. That picture that you're seeing there, that is what they call the spectral plot or the full spectrum, and uses all of that information to determine what the fluorescence is, and uses unmixing rather than compensation. Mathematically, they're very similar, but not identical. I'm not going to get into those weeds right now. Our process is more or less the same in either one. And then mass cytometry, again, the power of mass spec is the precision of those measurements, and you don't really have those overlap concerns and stuff. Right? So that's why you can measure so many detectors, so many targets there. I will mention one more thing on the mass spec, or excuse me, the mass cytometry. I said 40, 50, 60 parameters. You can do that, but a number of those parameters are for things like barcoding and stuff like that. In terms of direct targets, it's more like 40 to 45 or something like that. It's really very exactly. But then you combine that with barcoding and stuff, it can be really useful. All right, I put this together to kind of wrap the whole thing up in comparing the technologies. At the bottom, there's a key. There's good, there's okay, and there's not great. That means different things in different categories, and I've got some text in there as well. I want to key on a couple of things. Again, that experiment creation piece that I was talking about before. With regards to the Helios, this is a machine that we will run for you. This is not something that we expect you guys to sit down in front of and do. Is it super hard? No, but there's enough going on that it can be tricky, and then actually running the instrument can be difficult to know what's going on. Whereas with the Aurora, you have tons and tons of options, right? You can do that online, you can do it on the offline computers, tons of options for doing that stuff on that machine. So that's really good. And then the Diva instruments, again, it's not great on those guys. They're not really, you have to do everything kind of real time and at the machine. I mentioned sample prep as well, more difficult for the Helios because of the concerns with scatter, timing and flexibility. And again, the Helios, this is where that machine shines because of the way you can hold your cells for long periods. Reagents, the Helios is not, it's not sole source anymore, but it is very limited sources. Most of the reagents you have to buy directly from the company, and that means they can do what they want with them. So that's a little bit tricky. Controls, the Helios, there is no compensation controls or anything like that, so you can avoid all of those things. The Aurora, I mark as a good here. The need for the controls to get them right is highly critical. You have to get them just right to get your unmixing just right. Once you've gotten them just right, you don't run them anymore, right? So you've got that benefit, or not anymore, you don't run them for a while. And then again, on the Diva instruments, you need to get them right, and you also need to continue to rerun them for the most part. Panel design is super easy on the Helios, again, because of no fluorescence, whereas it gets a little bit easier on the Auroras and a bit more difficult on the Diva instruments. On the Aurora, the panel design I mentioned as easier or moderate there because if you want to build a 30 or 40 color panel, that's going to be difficult. It's always going to be difficult to push the limits like that. But if you want to build a 14 or 15 color panel on the Auroras and you got all that space, it's a lot easier to fit things together. Right? Barcoding on the Helios is great. Barcoding on the Aurora is not really, although maybe we're getting some evidence that that could work if they needed to. That remains to be seen. Data acquisition operation, again, the Helios, we're going to operate that for you, whereas the Aurora and the Diva instruments are pretty straightforward. For anybody who's done this before, they're pretty straightforward. That longitudinal stability is excellent on the Aurora, way better than I could have hoped for. Limited on the Helios, but they have a normalization built in there. So just if that is something you're concerned with, they do have some limited built normalization that they can do. And on the Diva instrument, the traditional instruments, I'm bashing on this a little bit. It is possible to get good longitudinal stability on these machines. It's just a lot more difficult to do than it is on the Auroras, right? You can build in controls, you can do all these things, but it's just a lot more extra effort that we don't really have to worry about with the Aurora instruments. Speed, I sort of alluded to before. The new Auroras, the better electronics are a little bit faster. Overall, the Aurora instruments and the Diva instruments they match up pretty well. Volumetric, yeah, again, the volumetric instruments, the Aurora is fantastic. I mentioned dead volume simply because operationally, this can be a problem for people. On the Helios and on the Aurora, the dead volume is the same for every time you load a sample. It's just the way the fluidics work. On the Diva instruments, it's not, right? And if you're not aware of that, that can be a huge detriment to you. When you load a sample onto the Diva instruments, you're losing sample as soon as it gets on there until you get that arm closed, for anybody who's run these machines before. So if you're not paying attention and you load a sample and you're like, around, and then you close the arm, you've lost more than if you put it on and close the arm, right? So when people were worried about recovery and stuff on the Diva instruments, more often than not, that's not the machine itself, it's the loading of samples and the instrument operation itself. So that can be a bit of a sticking point until you're comfortable with it. Some bonus stuff, the multi-center studies. Again, the Auroras shine here because of those matched configurations. My 5 laser machines are the same as the 5 laser machines in Buffalo and the same as the ones in California, right? So with some controls, you can ship samples and you can ship experiments across the country and stuff. And then institutional knowledge. Again, we talked about this already. This is where the Diva instruments really shine because there's tons and tons of experience. Whereas we have less of that on the other machines. All right, so that's my overview of instruments. I know I went probably more into detail than I needed to on a lot of that stuff, but I want to give you a sense of where things stand. I also want to talk about some of the other services and support stuff that we do. Communication and scheduling. Our website is a solid resource. I don't want to say it's amazing because we know we need to make some updates and stuff there. It's not very dynamic, but things like our policies and stuff are all up to date on there, and I do encourage people to look at those. We have pages for all of our equipment. We have useful links and all that kind of stuff. So there's a lot there, but it's not very dynamic. So we understand that that's a little bit limited. The PPMS system works fantastic for our group. By the way, PPMS and our website are two different things. I think sometimes that gets confused. PPMS is a scheduling, billing, tracking system, and it does a really good job for us. A couple of the new things that they put in PPMS are an edit button for you to manipulate your reservations once they're on the counter and stuff. And when you sign in at the instrument, you can control what account numbers you use and stuff like that. So if you forgot to do something, you can do it at the machine, which is nice. Our email listserv, that was the last thing on the list, is a nice resource. One, because I can reach a lot of people, but also because there's a lot of people on there. You guys can reach each other as well. I don't think we get spammed too badly, but there are one a week or two a week or something like that where people are asking for reagents or asking to borrow a cell line or something like that. And there's a huge number of people that get that information, so that can be useful. Analysis computers. We have a couple of analysis computers in the lab that you guys can come up and use if you'd like to. One of those workstations has a bunch of different programs installed that you can come up and use. We have a separate dedicated workstation for the full spectrum instrument for the Cytometry Shared. We have a separate dedicated one. Actually, this is wrong. That ISX information actually has its own computer now. Sorry about that. So there are 3 separate workstations that you guys can come up and use if you want to do some of that work in our lab. You cannot or do not want to download programs. You can do that here with us. Our archiving and transfer service works pretty well. We use code 42 for automatic archiving of data that comes off of the instruments. Depending on the machine, it can back up either routinely throughout the day or once at night for every single for the machine. That data is stored in the archive and saved indefinitely. The archives go back to 2008 or 9 right now, I believe. And we can always go back and retrieve files assuming you can give us the correct experiment information, we'll be able to find them eventually. The transfer pipeline is a way for moving data from our lab back to your own lab. It is super easy to use and fast. It's not for long-term storage, and there's issues with communicating the river campus and stuff. So for anybody who's coming across the street, that's a little bit tricky. Box is becoming more and more popular with users just because it's flexible storage for anybody. The only downside of Box is you have to sit there and wait for it to transfer and then log back out. Lastly, consultation, just general consultation stuff. We are always available for this kind of thing. Zoom or in person, we talk about experimental design and panel design and data interpretation, all kinds of things that you might want to discuss. As I mentioned earlier, if you've got an idea that you want to try with Flow, just please let us know and we'll help you to get the best information that you can. We support both FlowJo and FCS Express in the lab. You can get licenses for either one. I personally use FCS Express much more often nowadays than FlowJo for a number of reasons that I'm not worth getting into right now, but we do support both licenses. And we do have some practice data and stuff. If anybody wants to just tinker with it, we can share all that stuff with you. And high dimensional support as well. We talked about Tim earlier with all the work that he does on that front. And we can help to some limited extent on that front as well. And then continuing education, we do fairly regular seminars and lectures and stuff, so please keep an eye out. Most of that is communicated through the listserv, although it's also announced on the website if you're checking in over and over again. And our FCC library, which is another server share that we operate and maintain, has a ton of educational material if you want to explore that. It's kind of haphazardly in there, but there's a ton in there if you want to do it. And then the last piece I want to mention is direct software, says direct instrument support services that we can do. There is Slack installed on all of our instrument computers, so you don't have to search the hallways looking for support. You type in a message, it goes to everybody on the team, and somebody can help you out. If nobody can walk down to you at that moment, we do have full remote software access on almost every instrument that we have. We can remote in, we can look at what you're seeing and help you along if you need that help. That does work after hours as well. I can't guarantee you that somebody will be ready to jump on a computer and help you after hours, but it does happen. So please take advantage. And then lastly, I want to mention our full service support. We've talked about a little bit about it as we go along, specifically with regard to the Seahorse, but we can do this for different technologies as well. If you have a project in mind and you don't have the hands in the lab to do this, we can potentially support you in some of those things. We'll have to have a conversation, obviously, but we can support people in those things, both in the traditional flow cytometry. Bioplex is one that lent itself nicely to that, and the Seahorse as well. So please reach out if you have questions or want to talk about any of those things. And I didn't save as much time as I wanted to, but I saved a few minutes. If anybody wants to ask any questions or anything like that, otherwise I saved you 3 minutes. So there you go. All right, thanks. I think that's, yeah. Nailed it.
There's more sandwiches. Please take one to go.